Hello and welcome to the Global Business Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Philpott. Hello everyone and welcome back to the show. If it's your first time with me today, welcome. It's great to have you here. On the show, I chat to business people all across the world, from CEOs of multinational companies to startup entrepreneurs, people working in the not-for-profit space, and people in business in general. The idea is that we all get to learn from each other and see how companies are dealing with the global pandemic and what strategies they're putting in place to come out the other side. What's the new business world order going to look like? We chat to my guests and we find that out. Today is no exception. I have a wonderful guest all lined up for you. So in a minute, let's go and have a chat to him. So it's a very warm welcome to the Global Business Podcast to Matt Rickard. Matt, how are you today, mate?
I'm very well, thanks, Mark. And good to connect after some time, a few years. So really good to be back in contact with you. And all good here. How are you doing?
Yeah, fantastic, mate. I'm bopping up and down on the ocean today. I think we're just coming up to low tide, so things are good. And there'll be plenty out trying to catch some fish shortly. But you and I are going to speak about business today, but before we get on to that, whereabouts in the world are you sitting chatting to us from?
So I'm in a place called Pai, which is about 140 kilometers from Chiang Mai, kind of up in the hills of Northern Thailand. I've been here, I've had a place here for about 10 years and kind of spent time here on and off, but been here now, back here for a year, working remotely, running the business, and obviously with everything that's recently happened, kind of semi-isolated, but it's also quite an isolated property anyway, kind of off-grid and off-road. But just up here in Pai, so in the hills.
I'm sure you've just made a whole ton of listeners around the world very jealous by explaining where you are exactly. I'm sure a lot of people would like to be stuck up there north of Chiang Mai today, either doing business or just on holiday. Would be a nice thing. Nice part of the world to visit for a holiday, isn't it?
It is lovely. And actually, I mean, people see my pictures online and they're all like, looks, but it is also a bit of a, like you would know, people, when people hear you say you live on a boat, there's the lovely element to it. There's also the working element. This property is a kind of living property, really. We have to take water from the river, treat it. It goes in a tank. We run on solar. There's also, and I'm not moaning about it. I love it, but it's there's the holiday element, and then there's the working element to living in a property like this. So.
I'm glad you said that, because everybody thinks I'm sitting back having cocktails every day on my boat, and not doing anything. But as you just said, it's the opposite. You've got to keep these things going, don't you?
Yeah, 100%. It is. Yeah, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I love it for that reason. But yeah, it's not all holiday.
Good stuff. Now, we met a number of years ago when we were both in Singapore, and quite an extraordinary place to live and work. Singapore, it's one of the innovative capitals of the world, that's for sure. Tell us about your business, though, that you're running today. What's the name of the business and what's the aim of it?
So the business that I am co-founder for is called Task, which task.io. I spell it out because obviously the word task is in many business names, actually. But Task we're a tech company, and we're all about enabling organizations to create some sort of positive impact with what they're doing. So we are a mobile-first software as a service platform that allows HR managers, CSR managers, sustainability managers to engage teams and get them involved in activities that align to their social, environmental missions. So, it's part about enabling those teams to understand what the social mission is, and also engaging them in it. And the drivers really for our business, why it's come about, is because I think the millennial generation and the people in the world today work for companies that do the right thing. You and I both know, I think we've connected over topics like CSR many years ago, but there's been changes more recently where, people will now make decisions to buy from brands that behave in the right way. People will work for brands and want to work for brands that do the right thing, that treat people and planet in the right way. And they'll make decisions to work for those companies, not because they're getting paid a certain amount, but because of how that company looks after the world. So, yeah, we're all about enabling that process, engaging large teams, and I mean like thousands. So we work typically with larger businesses, 3, 4, 5,000 employees, and allow those leaders to engage those teams, those people, in those activities that align to the social mission of the business.
What was the inspiration behind starting this particular business?
So my business partner and I, so Steve founded, I'm co-founder. Steve is a techie guy. I've been in tech for a long time, but have, I suppose, more experience on the social side of things. Steve's initial motivation starting Task, he has another successful company in the recruitment space, that's also a tech business that's run for about, I think, 14 years. And he was kind of playing around a few years ago. He and I actually are neighbors from 40 years ago, funnily enough, in the UK. And then we met each other in Thailand more recently, about 7 years ago. And I would brainstorm with him over this piece of tech he created, which was Task. And very simply, he wanted to do something good with technology. He'd spent years with his traditional business that was doing well and, giving him a lifestyle that he loves. But he was very motivated to take a piece of technology and do something good. And him and I working together took what was essentially a piece of technology that was a microtasking platform. And initially, the first client was a company called Freeland, that were a conservation business here in Thailand, that actually have been in the news a lot recently. So they, part of what they're doing is trying to shut down the wet markets. The project we're working on with them here is around protecting tiger populations. And the original platform was created to manage a project where they were working with villagers, with forestry rangers to help track information around tiger populations. As an example, I'm a forestry ranger. I'm out there and I see something like a tiger footprint. How do I capture that data and let Freeland know back at head office in Bangkok, so they can start to understand the movements of these tigers and protect them better? So yeah, I mean, that's probably a long answer to a short question, but the motivation essentially was, let's take technology and do something good. And that took us on a journey over the last 18 months of working a little bit in the non-profit sector, but then really going into businesses and looking at, well, what is the engagement model here with teams across this platform where you can do good? And also there's a whole element to our business is about linking those organizations with non-profits as well, which is part of those activities, tracking things like volunteer time. And obviously that connection to the non-profit sector is important with that type of activity.
So how long has the business been going for now?
So the business is a couple of years old. I came in with Steve 18 months ago, but we are very much a startup. I mean, we spent all of last year, really getting our product market fit right. We did a bit of fundraising. We started to bring on clients in kind of Q4. We've done a lot of work testing the product with Freeland and other non-profits, and then started to grow into the business space. So we kind of came towards the end of last year knowing, okay, this is our product, this is how we go to market in the business space. We come into 2020 and raring to go with a bit of a pipeline of clients, and then we find this interesting year we're in. So, of which we're now midway through. So yeah, a couple of years.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Now, we're going to talk a lot about the whole COVID-19 and what's happened in relation to the business, but before we get there, I just want to reiterate a little bit more about what you're talking about where the business was situated prior to COVID-19 coming down the road. So you literally were ready to launch to the world, and this year was going to be the year where you took it all out there to market. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, we were out there last year. It's not like we were hidden, but a lot of, as I think you've probably had quite a bit of a startup experience. In the early stage of a tech startup, you're doing a lot of testing, working with clients. Like last year, for example, we had Limfox as a client. We were doing some work with their teams in Bangkok around health and wellness. So, there was a lot of essentially testing, trial and error with the product, with different clients, within mostly markets of actually the UK, here in Thailand because we're based here, and also in Australia, but a handful of clients, and really kind of testing and getting ourselves to the point where, we really understand this is our value proposition. We have, a fully built product, and that the MVP was built kind of beginning of last year. So yeah, essentially coming into 2020, we had a very clear vision of our story to businesses, and it was really about, right, 2020 is all about build up the client base from a B2B standpoint. So yeah.
Great. You're the first startup or more or less startup guy I've had on the show so far, so I'm really interested to understand, I'm sure the listeners are as well, what happened as far as when COVID came to town in the early days, in terms of you and your partner. What were the conversations going on about what you were going to do with the business? How did you react initially in the very beginning of this COVID-19 pandemic?
That's a good question, because when I think back on it, so the beginning was it was the beginning of the year essentially. I was like Q1, midway through Q1. We looked at it and said, right, what do we do? We were a little bit, I suppose, hysterical is maybe not the right word, but as a couple of guys running a startup, you're always looking for problems to solve. I mean, that's part of what you're doing with your tech and your learning. And so we were immediately going, right, how can we help? How can we use the tech to help? We've got our business as normal clients we're talking to who are looking at our technology, and we first launched actually a project on the app that was a community project engaging community members. Actually, it was in Perth because we've got a consultant who does some work with us there, and it was doing things like tracking how people tracking or engaging people at home in activities that would keep their mental well-being in good state. So read a book today, play a game, and it was that, as a business, that was we were kind of reacting, and it wasn't the right project, and we reacted probably early, and then we just sat back and said, look, let's just carry on with things as normal and see what happens, because we didn't know whether this was going to be a month or two or six, and now that I think there's still some question marks around the impact of this economically, obviously. So yeah.
What about your geographical location? Because here you are in Thailand, effectively running the business from there. So the way this pandemic went, it was affecting different countries at different times when we first started off. So where was Thailand in the cycle of things affecting the business side of things?
So, well, firstly, we're based here. So my business partner's in the south, or south of Bangkok. I'm in the north. And funny, actually, we work like this all the time. We work on Zoom. So our business model as such, in terms of, engaging with prospects and clients, partners, it didn't affect us at all. So it's funny, I was jumping on calls with people who I realized it was massively disruptive, especially as people were starting to be, sent home and told to work from home. But from a business point of view, Thailand is not necessarily a main market for us. We are remote here. We live here for lifestyle reasons. So, the impact actually for us from a client point of view, we have a client in the UK, a big sports club, Holton Tennis Club. That's when we started to see impact for the business, because they, once, I can't remember the date, but once obviously things like sports clubs closed down, the clients we had could not do what they did with us, which was, in that case, we work with the tennis coaches. They track activities around training disabled students on tennis lessons, and they create content around that for donors, and all of that stuff just stopped because from a Thailand point of view, we're not really geographically focused on the business as such, as in terms of where we are. It doesn't really impact us that way, but as it started to hit the clients that we had in certain regions, then we started to see it.
So were you able to engage with those clients, even though your business model was, I guess, fairly comfortable when it came to using the online technology to interface with your customers? Were your customers that savvy as well? Like, were some of them able to actually continue doing things with you?
Yeah, from a tech point of view, that was not the issue. It's more because of the nature of what we do, which is engaging teams, right? We're a tech product, but we're engaging physical teams typically, as in people who do stuff together in groups. So yeah, we could interact with our clients tech wise, but the reality is, with the clients we were working with, virtually every project was about engaging a team, and those teams are no longer engaging each other in the types of activities we're working with them on. So yeah, that was a challenge. And in fact, all of those clients pretty much, when I look at it, we're still speaking with them all, but most of those projects had stalled or have stalled. And then, that's when we started looking at, right, what do we do until there's some sort of normal, as in these organizations, get back to an operational normal that, which matches to how we're helping them. So
did those businesses effectively shut down overnight? Did you all of a sudden wake up one morning and your customer base was, stagnant?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the spread of our clients is, we're not like, oh, we're just focused on one geo right now. So
Yeah.
in that way, it didn't just happen overnight. But we have a couple in the UK, we've got a couple in Australia. So there was a staggering between different things happening. But yeah, essentially, yeah, I mean, as things closed down, I mean, Holton in the UK, I mean, we're still speaking to them now, and as they get back up and running, and I hope they do some great work, then we will start to engage with them again. But effectively, there was no use for what we were working with them on.
So now that you're in the situation that you're in, and you started off, as you said, having activities already happening last year, ready to build the pipeline again into this year, and then this happens, have you sat down with or have you been chatting to your business co-founder there and talking about, okay, do we need to change our strategy here? Has that been a conversation that's been going on?
Yeah, it's funny actually. We were talking about this maybe during the week. Yeah, there was a tendency, and I'll maybe get into this in a minute, when we look at what we've done with some clients, with another set of clients during the virus. There has been this kind of tendency to think, do we now pivot the business and start going in this direction? But actually, we've not done that, because the conversations we're having with prospects and a couple of clients is, yeah, look, just wait a while, because we want to, we still want to work with you on this project and this project. And there's a for example, there's one big prospect we have in Australia who we've been speaking to throughout this. They're obviously all now working from home, and that project was put on hold, but they've said, we will now revisit it, we think, as of July 1. So we have not, we're lucky as a business that we are very lean. The way that and again, that's been something, I think, a lesson, maybe more for me, because Steve has run another business for 14 years. But the fact that we're lean with the cash that we have has meant that we've been able to just go, right, let's get through the next kind of 3 to 6 months, and just make sure we come out the other side. Let's not panic, change our business model, or start, because as we get back to a sort of normal, what we were doing will probably become completely relevant again anyway, if not more relevant, with some of the lessons the world is taking from this pandemic.
That was going to be my next question, actually, in terms of the opportunities that you've recognized already throughout this process, this period we're in, and being able to, I guess, evolve the business in not only a different way, but a newer way. Is that going to be a reality for you as we come out of this with these new opportunities?
Yeah, I think so. So this is the question we're asking ourselves right now as well, and we're not answering it. We're just going to learn from what happens over the next month. But we had, the opportunity, I suppose, that we've seen from the existing situation is our developer in India, or one of our developers, was managing a food bank on his WhatsApp group. But the whole food bank space has kind of blown out of control in the last few months, because many countries there's been bigger demands on food banks because of what's happened. But also the way that food banks operate with volunteer models has also been massively strained, because a lot of the volunteers with food banks are older. They've gone home. So there's been this massive disruption in the food bank space. And we're working with our developer in India, who was running one on a WhatsApp group, effectively with a few hundred people. So what he was doing is, people were requesting, a family needed help. They would send it into the WhatsApp group. Someone would say, I will help. I'll make a donation. I'll go and deliver. I'll pick up the food. So we took this workflow, onto our platform, and found that we had a really, the tech was really well suited to solve this kind of food bank problem because it's all about team engagement, connection, all the stuff we were doing. But that's turned into now, let's focus all of our time. And this has been now kind of 5-6 weeks. We've onboarded 8 or so food banks in different places around the world. So yeah, this question of does this now change our business model is an interesting one, because we've been looking at it going, well, and the other thing is we're not going out there charging food banks necessarily. So, we've just done it as this is our solution for COVID right now. How do we then turn that into the business opportunity coming out the other end? Which we maybe don't have the answer to today. It's something we're looking at, the natural connection between food banks and businesses, because that really will help us evolve out of the other side. But yeah, that's this solving this food bank problem for us has been the really interesting process of the virus, because our tech's been useful, and that there is a question for us of does this change the business dramatically? We don't think so. It's we were always going to have this ecosystem of non-profits on our platform that can connect with businesses. So we just see this as okay, it's maybe just slightly changed the go-to-market model or the sales plan, as in we're now bringing on the non-profits before we go back to the businesses.
Fantastic. That series of responses you gave me prompts a few questions in different areas. The first one I have is, what's evident here is that your and Steve's ability, because of the lifestyle choices you've made, to keep a pretty calm approach to this, because you're not, let's say, in the middle of downtown Sydney in Australia or New York City and under a lot of the pressures of having highly expensive rental properties to look after for your offices or anything like that. You've chosen this lifestyle choice. Therefore, and we were talking about this before we got on the show today, that you're in a relatively calm and beautiful part of the world that's not affected so much by what's going on, and as a result of that, has that impacted your attitude when it comes to the business side of it as well? Have you remained a bit calmer, do you think?
Yeah, I think without doubt. I mean, I think firstly, I think I speak for both Steve and I think we've right from the beginning, we've kind of approached this with an attitude of gratitude, really thinking we're very fortunate for a number of reasons. I mean, that's through our own choice, but that I think there's an emotional aspect to that, and there's a reality aspect to that. The emotional part is that it just gives us more confidence to keep going. The reality aspect is, we are very fortunate that we don't have the pressures of, if we had an office in Singapore right now, which I've worked out of offices in Singapore. I mean, we do not have the typical pressures of a business that is physically based in a city, that has huge overheads, and that was always the intention of how we grew this business anyway. But it's really provided us with, I think, a lot of confidence through this, and calmness, I think was the word you used, right? So it's probably allowed us to certainly approach the whole thing in a calmer way, and not be so. We don't have the pressures that many other businesses have, and that is part of our kind of ethos with how we want to grow this business as well. Anyway.
On the flip side, has there been any downside? Has there been any things that have come up during this time that has added some stress in areas that you weren't thinking about or considering? I mean, I still, from a not closing deals when you're trying to grow a business is still stressful, but balanced against the fact that we know we can survive through this is obviously gives us the kind of confidence and comfort to go forward. But beyond that, probably not. I think more personally, I mean, I'm quite a social person. I do travel quite a bit. I mean, I love it where I am here, but I've been locked down for, I think now I can travel to Chiang Mai, but I think the impact of that, from a mental point of view, just needing that kind of interaction and getting away probably has been the only thing that I would say is negative. I mean, that's not necessarily part of the business, but I am part of the business, so in that way it is. So yeah. No, that's an important aspect, and I think sometimes we forget that people are businesses and businesses are people, right? So everybody, and this is the fascinating thing about doing the show, everybody's handling this situation in their own unique way around the world when it comes to their business, but also to their personal input into that business as well. So, if you were, say, again, in a major city somewhere and highly stressed about your environment, then your reactions and responses within the business might be different to what they are sitting under a palm tree in Chiang Mai.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, the other thing, actually, I think we are very fortunate that we have some really great people behind the business. As in advisors who actually have way more pressure than us. I mean, we've got a couple of people out of Australia so we have advisors in the business that act as mentors, and we speak to them regularly. I mean, there's a guy out of the UK we have a call with every 2 weeks, another guy out of Australia, there's different people in different places, and I think that support network is really important anyway when you're a startup that's surviving on kind of low funding and getting through that build stage, but particularly what's going on now. The benefit of having a network like that, and people have been really willing to talk at the moment as well, which is great. I mean, I think that's just a factor of what's happening. People are at home and they appreciate the kind of Zoom interaction and everything else. So yeah, that support network has been important, both from a personal point of view, but also from a business strategic point of view of how do we go into 2021 and make sure we've got enough cash in the bank to, build this business of where we intend to get to on the plan.
Yeah, that's a really good support structure to have in place. And I guess, like you just mentioned, that these people, because they are locked down at home, they've probably got a little bit more time to engage with you than what they normally would. So have you found that to be the case? Do you think they've been a little bit more readily available during this period?
I mean, I found that across the board, actually, even from a prospecting point of view. Normally when you're prospecting, so I kind of manage the commercial side of the business, and both Steve and I are focused on growing the business, but I maybe spend more time doing direct prospecting. And it's interesting, I use LinkedIn a lot to do that and speak to people, but it's much easier to get people on the phone and have conversations. So I think, not just within that advisory support network, but I just think across the board. Certainly, if I look back over the last 2-3 months, it's been much easier to drum up conversations. And, we've gone out there looking for advice on our platform and saying, I spent like a month talking to employee engagement managers and, how can our tech be of use at this time, because things have been disrupted and teams are at home. And so people have been really willing to jump on calls and speak. So definitely, I think that's as a result of what's been happening.
So looking forward, let's bring out the crystal ball for a second. What do you guys think the new business landscape's going to look like? You mentioned a couple of times so far you've used the vocabulary back to normal. Do you really think things are going to go back to the way they were, or do you see a new landscape coming up? For your business, I'm talking about specifically, not for for my business, but for your business.
Yeah, I mean, for certainly the way we see it, I think it will go back to some sort of normal. I mean, we're spending all this time, like I say, with food banks right now, but that was always part of our business strategy, was to have this ecosystem of non-profits on the platform. So as we work with more businesses, they can make connections to those companies for reasons of funding and sending volunteers in. And so yeah, I think in a way it's just slightly changed how we've grown the business as opposed to changing the business itself. And I would say, the way we look at it is Q3, Q4, we will be getting back to, I mean, I see it as pretty much where we would have seen ourselves at the beginning of Q1. It's just there's been a delay. And what it's actually, there's other things that have happened. We started to look at, well, how do we create a lot more automation around our business? So using things like Udemy, which is a online learning platform. So, we've created a training course on there. So this has maybe changed the business a little, but we had always hoped to create that kind of onboarding automation. So, self-serve model within the platform. I think really for me, I could be wrong, but I see it getting back to the kind of normal I saw in Q1, and we haven't necessarily slowed down. It's just we've changed what we're doing during a time where the businesses we would have been doing stuff with have been challenged with, their own situations of social distancing and employees at home. And the other part, though, I should say is, we have had to refocus where we believe we can be successful, because certain industries, have been hit so hard. For example, I've been having conversations, I won't mention them, they're not client, but with someone we both know in Singapore, a very big player in the hospitality space that was a potential prospect. And I just know, as we get back to normal, their business has been so disruptive that looking at things like CSR and sustainability right now, in line with what we do as a tech company, will be probably irrelevant for at least the next year, because they're focusing on, they're fixing all sorts of different fires now, because hospitality has been hit so hard, hotels, and
So it is enforcing you to look at new pipelines potentially in terms of areas that you may not have considered so quickly in the evolution of your business to try and keep the pipeline filled. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I probably should have mentioned that earlier. Yeah, I mean, it's from an industry level, very early on, actually, we had a piece of analysis looking at, industries that were doing well out of the current situation versus ones that, are having a really tricky time. And we obviously, from a sales point of view, had to align ourselves to that and say, well, there's no point, for example, spending the next 6 months talking to airlines. I mean, if there's just certain industries that have been, really troubled, unfortunately, from what's going on. So yeah, we've had to align at least the kind of prospecting process to industries that at least will be buoyant enough to be able to look at technology and adopt technology for CSR and sustainability reasons.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing. If you went back to the beginning of all this again, what would you have done any different, do you think, if anything?
The only thing, I mean, probably nothing, but like I say, the food bank stuff for us has been really, it's been rewarding, and it's been a huge learning curve for us. And the only thing I might have changed is for that first month, I probably would have said to Steve, let's just do nothing, because, and I think I'm sure this will resonate across lots of business. And this wasn't just business. I think personally, people were in a little bit of shock for the first month, and we reacted to that in the business, started trying to kind of solve things, and we didn't really, you kind of needed the dust to settle. So the only thing I might have changed is said, look, for the first month, which I think would have been March, really, would have just said, let's just sit and wait and see how this is really going to play out. How is it really going to affect these deals over here, these clients over here? Do we need to change this? So the only thing I might have just relaxed a little bit more at the beginning. But hindsight is wonderful, and you can't change the past. And I also feel pretty fortunate what we have been able to do and where we are at as a business coming through this. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good piece of advice in terms of looking at it from that point of view. And a lot of knee-jerk reactions have happened not only in the business space, but also in the political space, as we've seen different countries around the world and their leaders taking different strategies into this. I think there's a lot to be said about patience and sitting back for a little while, if you can, because, I've had people on the show saying, look, we had to swap overnight. And I had a hospitality guy on the other day, and he said, we had to change our approach overnight. We had to give takeaway orders overnight. Basically, our business model changed, and otherwise we wouldn't be surviving today, right? So I think it's horses for horses. And in your case, you two were in a situation where you could actually, hit the pause button for a while, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I love those stories, those things you just mentioned. I think, as tragic as it's been in many ways, there's also some brilliant stories and, inspiring stories that have come out of businesses being inventive like that. And I think that's the hope. And I'm very optimistic, really, of what is at the other end of this and how it comes out, particularly with where we're at. What we're doing is all about really, allowing businesses to treat people, planet in the right way and be more engaged in that process. And I can see that emerging in the messaging of, I was just reading an article then in the UK of, talking about the rebuild in the UK needs to have sustainability in mind. And I think you're going to see a lot of this, and the early on stuff from the Netherlands about the kind of donut economic response with SDG, Sustainability Development Goals, central to the rebuild. And yeah, I'm very optimistic of what will come out of the other end of this situation. So.
Yeah, great. Matt, my last question today is around passing on any tips you may have for people out there listening today who are, in a bit of a not as situation like you are, not as calm as you are. Maybe they're panicking a little bit more. Maybe there's a lot more stress associated with where they're at in their business. What couple of pieces of advice would you give for them today?
Well, I think it's probably the words you just said. I mean, for me, not panicking is the most important thing. And even then, when you said, was there something, I sound calm about it. You said, was there something I would have done differently? It was not panicking that first month, but, focusing on what you can change. Because a lot of the things that are happening now, you can have no effect on. So panic is kind of pointless. That, and also though, just being hugely focused on, what you don't spend as a business. I mean, this is something that for us, and we are already very fortunate, as you said, but I think every business can always cut costs and can always be shrewd. And, I think just allowing yourself 20% extra for, if you think you have enough, we'll make sure there's 20% more there and cut that somewhere else if you need to, because being able to get through this with cash in the bank and coming out the other end strong is what's important. So there was two things there really. So for me, it's don't panic and just really laser focus on that cost cutting, so there is cash in the business coming out the other end.
Great pieces of advice. For everyone listening today, I'm going to put the links in the show notes for people to connect with Matt if you want to, and I'm sure he's open to answering any questions you might have or giving pieces of advice. Matt, it's been fantastic having you on the Global Business Podcast show today and catching up and reconnecting with you again. We'll make sure we don't spend so many years apart before we reconnect again.
Yeah, it's been great, Mark. It's been a long time and good to hear your voice, and hopefully you get to jump on the boat sometime. I'm nowhere near the ocean right here, but if you ever start going around the world on the thing, maybe you can pop past Thailand and I can travel south and see you sometime.
There's an offer too good to refuse. Matt Rickard, thanks very much for being on the show. We will catch up with you again soon.
Great. Cheers, Mark.
There we are. That was Matt Rickard joining me from Northern Thailand, from a little place called Pai, a lovely part of the world to be running a global business from. And Matt is the co-founder of Task. I will put all the details in the show notes for you. If you're out there and you are also having some educational, motivational, inspirational information to share about how your business is weathering the COVID-19 storm, please get in contact with us. I'd love to have you on the show to talk about your experiences. This podcast has been designed for people to learn, to be motivated, and to be inspired by, so that we can all get through to the other side and understand what lessons we can learn from all the different business people across the world. So that's it for this particular episode. If you're looking for more episodes from the Global Business Podcast, you can join our Facebook page or click the link in the show notes and you'll be taken to all of our previous episodes. Thanks for joining in today. My name's Mark Philpott. I look forward to the next time that you can join us on the Global Business Podcast. Stay safe and stay well, everyone.